Welcome to Wadsworth History on Film, a program presented by the Wadsworth Area Historical Society and designed to record the oral history for Wadsworth for posterity. I'm Cesar Carino, your host, and our guest today is someone who's been around town for a long, long time, right in the downtown, right in the bowels of our entire city, and that's Carl Dudley. Carl, you're not a native of Wadsworth, we know that, but you feel like a native probably because you spent almost every day of your waking life downtown in Stonier's jewelry store. Is that where you started when you first came to town?
Yes, with Mrs. Stonier. She was a widow, as you know, in 1954.
1954. Marion Stonier, now 100 years old plus.
Right.
And we were going to get Marion on the program earlier this year, and she was ready to come, but her daughter Ruth was going to bring her in, and Ruth got stuck in Florida. But we're still planning on getting Marion in here to see if we can get some of those tremendous memories that she has of the Stonier family and of her background as well. Before you started your career in, now is that a gemologist?
Gemologist and horologist.
And horologist.
Yes.
And that's the horology, of course, is watches and gems. Gemologist is the other one. Before you started, you had to be born somewhere. Where were you born, Carl?
I tell you like I tell everybody, I'm happy to tell you what you won't know.
Okay.
I was born 100 miles south of Wadsworth, a small hamlet called Hoskinsville.
Hoskinsville.
That's in Noble County, Ohio.
Noble County. Never heard of it.
No.
That's in Ohio, though.
It is in Ohio. And the nearest town was Bell Valley.
And that's not too big either, is it?
No, it's 300 people.
300.
Then the next large town of 1,500 is the county seat, Caldwell. You have probably heard of.
Well, somewhat, but how many people are in Caldwell? About
1,500.
1,500. Well, you probably thought that you had gone to New York City when you came to Wadsworth in 1954, because we had about, what, 12 or 13,000 people by then.
That's right.
Why, this was a huge town to you then.
Of course, I had been working in Akron before I came.
Oh, you came to Akron first, I see.
Right, I see.
Tell us a little bit about your progression to becoming, this is an unusual kind of thing, that is to be a gemologist and an horologist. But tell us how that happened. You went to high school, of course, and you graduated, and but before, I guess we better find out when you were born. Do you mind telling us when you were born?
March 4, 1926.
26. So you are at this point 72 years old.
Exactly.
And March 4th of next year, you'll be 75 years old, right?
Well, 73, but...
73?
Yeah.
You're 20, oh, that's right, 73 years old. Yeah, right. 72 years old. Next year you'll be 73 years old. 72, 73 follows 73. I was jumping the gun there a bit.
That's fine.
I just want to make sure I had enough years in your life, so that don't want to short you any. Went to school down in, probably, is there a school in that little?
I went to a one-room schoolhouse. I'm probably one of the later guys who've done that. And most of the time there were 2 people in my class, Caesar.
2 people?
And in the 8th grade, I had the honor of being janitor of the school.
You were the janitor of the school?
And I got $5 a month.
Wow.
And I was glad to get the $5 a month.
Well, see, that would have been during the Depression.
Right.
And $5 a month bought quite a bit of money, quite a bit at that time. Now, did you live on a farm, or did you live in the...
I lived on a 90-acre farm, which is rather misleading, because if I tell people around here we had a 90-acre farm, that sounds pretty big. But down where I come from, Caesar, there's a lot of hills. It wasn't all terrible or anything, so it wasn't what a 90-acre farm is in Medina County.
Ah, I hope we can keep some of those Medina County 90-acre farms going. We're losing them so fast that we won't have any farms to be talking about here. Did you have to go to the service then right after the war, or right after her graduation?
Yes, I couldn't wait to get in because of World War II. I really thought we had to be there. Now, 1 or 2 wars post to that, I'm not sure about.
That's right.
We won't get into that. But yes, I volunteered for the Navy, and I was in the Pacific and South Pacific. And
what kind of job did you have there? You weren't certainly a gemologist.
I was a radar operator and radar technician.
Oh.
And I was on LST. You may not know what that is. It's amphibious landing ship.
Yes.
And I enjoyed the Navy.
Well, you know, there are certain things that even though they were odious, that is wars and so forth, there were certain factors about war which I think were somewhat good, and that is the fact that that generation of people had some stern military training, which then prepared them for the life that they were going to lead. I would certainly hate to see a war break out or to have a need for people to be trained in the military way, but when you and I were trained as military people, it was absolute obedience right then and there, and you just did it. Then you came back from the war. Did you go to college?
I want to interject something.
Okay, please do.
Just a minute before that, talking about the Depression, and I know quite all about it. My father was on the Board of Education, and we would have men and women come to our house crying. They were desperate for jobs in the prison, wanted to know if my dad could help them, you know. And at that time, I presume it was the same generally, they wouldn't hire a woman if she was married.
That's right. We had that in Wadsworth too.
The man was supposed to take care of her, and they took a job from a man. But I saw a lot of that, people were that desperate in depression, at least where I came from.
Yeah, it was that way in Wadsworth. There's a lot of desperation here in Wadsworth. We had a teacher, Lionel Emmerich, E-M-E-R-I-C-H, now dead. He was a minister and is a teacher. This would have been 60 years, well, 55 years ago or so, at Asham School, who told of his neighbor having to eat the family dog because there was nothing left to eat. So that we did have some very disastrous times at that time. Following then graduation, which was probably what, in 1944?
Exactly.
44.
May 44.
May of 44. You probably then went to the Navy, and you were there for what, a year and a half or two?
2 years.
2 years. Then you got out of the Navy and did what, Carl?
Well, I was kind of loose ends and didn't know what to do. People said, hey, you wanted to be a watch repairman all your life. That isn't true. I didn't know what to do. I had a good friend who was a watch repairman, and I went to watchmaking school in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
What school was it, for the record?
It was WPHI, Western Pennsylvania Horological Institute.
WPHI, Western Pennsylvania Horological Institute.
Right.
And where was it located?
Pittsburgh.
Right in Pittsburgh, not a suburb, it's in Pittsburgh.
Well, it was, they had different branches as you progressed. One right down Pittsburgh, and one was on the north side of Pittsburgh. Different classes.
Okay, but you had
area, Pittsburgh.
In Pittsburgh. So that if historians want to check on the WHPI or WP, that's right, that they would be able to get it in Pittsburgh.
It is not in existence anymore.
It does not exist.
It flourished as so many things did, I think, on the GI Bill.
Oh, sure.
I was a GI student, and more or less after they didn't have so many students, probably 10 years, I don't know when, it did cease to exist.
What, describe a horological institute or a place where you learn how to repair watches.
Well, the first thing you do, you don't start repairing watches, of course. They want to get your dexterity and your hands and your mind together, and you make small tools on a lathe, which you use the rest of your life, a watchmaker's lathe. I've used a watchmaker lathe all my life. And you make small tools that's going to help you in your repairing your watches afterwards. And I said, that's just to get your hands and mind moving together, you know. Then you start working on the big stuff, clocks, and then you graduate to watches. And they have, of course, guinea pigs for you to work on that you have to make parts for, you know. And your instructors, like anything, probably foul up these watches to see if you can track down the problem, you know.
Right. Now, when you say make parts, I mean, the parts in a watch are extremely small, and they are odd shaped, you know, particularly the little thing that holds the gear so that it doesn't go backwards. What do you call that little lever?
Well, the pallet fork.
What is it? What is it?
Pallet fork.
Palace?
P-A-L-L-E-T, pallet.
Oh, pallet fork.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you, did you have to just kind of in your own mind figure out how to make that? Do you have a pattern or what?
Yeah, you have a pattern, and you have to do some micro measurements and stuff like that.
In other words, it's extremely delicate, isn't it?
It is. But I always preferred to work on watches to clocks for some reason. I like the small stuff.
We're going to get to this a little later on, but do you still do any, in your retirement, do you still do any?
My answer is no, I shouldn't say this on TV, but I do stuff for friends.
You do stuff for friends, okay.
I certainly.
Boy, you're going to have a lot of friends out there, Carl, because clock repair people are extremely difficult to find.
I know.
Now, was this a program that was, what, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years?
It was 2 years. And then I was out in the field for 3 years, decided I maybe didn't know as much as I thought I did, so I went to Chicago for another 9-month advanced course.
In clock or horology?
Horology and some jewelry repair.
And jewelry repair. Where did you learn all about gems, and how do you learn about gems?
Well, the way I did it, you can take correspondence courses, which I did when I could work and do that at night. And then you'd go and take what they call a residence course. They might set one up in Chicago, one in Cleveland for the correspondence students. And those can vary from 1 to 3 weeks.
Now, when you talk about gems, do you just learn what gems are or how to cut them? Do you cut diamonds?
Well, I can't cut diamonds, and I don't know anybody that can. I know people who say they do an advertisement in a paper, but I know them well enough to know they do not cut the diamonds. Most of the diamonds were cut in Belgium and Europe, and but they did they cut some diamonds in New York.
Now, how do they cut diamonds? I mean, if diamond's the hardest material we have, what can cut it?
They can cut them with another diamond.
Another diamond. In other words, they have to use a diamond to cut a diamond. When we talk about the hardness of a diamond, do you have any feel for how much stronger it is than steel, or?
Not the steel, perhaps, but the hardness of diamond on the scale is 10. And the next highest gemstone is 9.
And what is that?
Ruby.
Ruby is, oh, I didn't realize the ruby. I thought ruby was kind of glassy stuff.
No, ruby's hard.
It's pretty hard.
And sapphire's hard. They both come in the same thing, corundum. But the red one is ruby and the blue one is sapphire.
And they're both the same thing?
Both corundum. They have the same hardness and everything.
Same hardness. Ah, we're learning something about gems here.
An opal, to interject, is quite a soft stone, you know. I always told people when they bought an opal, it takes care of you. It's soft.
It's soft.
And of course, this is what we would call wives' tale. You shouldn't wear an opal unless it's your birthstone, which is October.
Now, why is that?
Why? I don't know.
But that's what they say.
Yeah. And it isn't true, you know that.
And probably people believe that too, don't they?
I suppose so.
I can see why they would. Carl, you were in Chicago, you were in Pittsburgh, you came from this little metropolis down there in southern Ohio. What drove you, or what brought you here to Wadsworth in 1954, when you were about 26, 27, 28 years old, right? Not an old man, right?
No, not like now. See?
No, well, we're all that. We all have that problem right now, getting older. But you were a young man, and what brought you here?
Well, I was working in Akron, as I told you, and been from a small town. I would like Akron, all right, but Mr. Stonier has died, as you well know.
Bill Stonier.
Whom I never met, and I guess he was a great man.
Oh, he was a great person.
City treasurer for years.
Yes, he's a wonderful person.
Anyway, Mr. Stonier had someone since he died that hadn't worked out too well. And so she contacted a couple of people in Akron. One was a wholesale jeweler, and one was a wholesale watch repair parts man. And she contacted 2 people, and I say this humbly. She told him she was hunting for a good young man, and they had both given her my name. And so she said, well, when they both had named the same person in Akron, you know, that she thought that's probably who she wanted. So we got together, and I came out here in January of '54, which I was very happy to do, and it was outside of getting married and being born, the best choice of my life.
Yeah, we're happy to have had you here, obviously. You mentioned that word married. Now, when did you get married?
I got married in 1951.
51, and where?
Newcomerstown, Ohio.
Oh, big town down there.
Well, it was about 4,000
Big
people.
town. Whom did you marry?
I married Catherine Huffman.
Huffman, H-U-F-F-M-A-N.
Well, it's H-O-F-F-M-A-N, but they call it Huffman.
Yes, right, H-O-F-F.
But
We
it's
spell
Huffman.
all of the names on this show because, on this program, because we want to make sure that the historians who will write the history.
It's H-O-F-F-M-A-N.
H-O-F-F-M-A-N.
And
Catherine.
it's K-A-T-H-R-Y-N. It's a different spelling of Catherine.
Okay, K-A-T-H-R-Y-N, Catherine Huffman, and where was she from?
She was from near Newcomerstown, between, well, I thought she graduated from West Lafayette High School, which might be well known. She was from between Orange and Bakersfield. There was a small town.
Somewhere between Orange and Bakersfield in southern Ohio.
Bakersfield.
Bakersville in southern Ohio. And how many people were in her community?
Well, about the same as mine. To get back to my community, I should set the record straight, perhaps. There was a country store with, you know, I know you know what I mean. And there was 2 gas pumps out front, and that was it.
That was it?
Yeah.
How many people were in that little town? Did you say 300?
No, in that town there was about probably 18.
Oh.
Bell Valley, the nearest town, was 300.
I see.
And there were 13 saloons there.
13 saloons, one store with 13 saloons.
No, in the Bell Valley.
In Bell Valley.
Had the 13 saloons.
13 saloons.
A town of 300 people.
Well,
So
that's, if you had that many doctors, they'd all be alive today. But that many saloons, I just wonder. Wow.
they know no
Why would
doctors but an undertaker.
They had no doctor, but they had an undertaker. 13 saloons, you're kidding.
No, I'm not kidding.
Well, 300 people, 13 saloons.
That's a fact. Of course, people came in from neighboring towns of 50 people. They were
Oh, yeah. Well,
you know about the Shenandoah, don't you?
Yes.
It's filled there, near there, you know.
It's right close to the Shenandoah. Isn't that?
In fact, the high school I went to doesn't exist now, and they have a new consolidation. They named it Shenandoah.
How many people were in your high school graduating class?
21.
21. Well, that's even fewer than were in my wife's graduating class. Or she graduated from Brunswick back in 1958.
I know that. You know how I know that?
How's that?
Because they used to bring a plaque down to me for engrave. And Linda Barnes, I believe that was
her maiden name, that's right.
She was a valedictorian. I believe the
She's
first
valedictorian of the class,
on
that's
this
right.
plaque, her name was on there. I used to do that for them. They would add one each year.
You remember that?
I sure
Oh,
do.
my heavens. Well, she graduated from there. And there are 52 people in her graduating class. And I tell this story because I think it's so unusual. Brunswick has grown so much now that there are now 18 more school buses than there were people in her graduating class. So, and you remember her name from as being the valedictorian.
I sure
Isn't
do.
that something?
Yep.
Small world. You then came, and Marion Stonier had someone else with her as well, working with her, did she not?
You mean in the position I took, or another clerk?
No, another clerk there.
Yes, she did.
And who was the other person?
Her name is Lois Freeze.
Spell that for us.
L-O-I-S-F-R-E-E-Z-E.
And she was related to whom in Wadsworth?
Her brother, and help me with this name.
Bob.
Her brother was a Lutheran minister at that time. Can you help me on that?
Not a Lutheran minister. His brother's wife was the... You're talking about Bob Freeze, right?
Yeah.
Bob Freeze's
Which
wife.
was her husband. Was Lois Freeze's husband.
Lois Freeze's husband. Her father was a Lutheran minister.
No. Her brother was a Lutheran minister here.
Her brother, Mumford.
Yeah, that's right, David Mumford.
Yes. But I thought you were saying that her husband was a Lutheran minister.
No.
No, David Mumford was Bob Freeze's wife. Wait, Bob Freeze's wife, Lois, was the sister of Pastor John David Mumford.
That's right.
Got it? That's right. From the Lutheran
I
Church.
didn't know his name was John David. I called him David with... Yeah.
I think it's John David. I could be wrong, but Pauline Thomas will correct me if I said the wrong thing. But I think it's John David Mumford.
That's
right.
very possible. I knew him as David.
Right, Mumford. So yes, and she then passed on.
Yes, she passed away with cancer.
She did indeed.
They had one son.
That's right. Bob was a teacher.
That's
Bob's
right.
a teacher, and Bob's gone now too.
And Bob was, in the summertime, the head of Camp Craig.
Camp Craig, which is up in Hinckley.
That's right.
And Bob was, Bob and I used to work together.
Okay.
Some years back on the, I guess, weighing station, when we would weigh trucks.
Oh,
Bob's
sure,
reason, yeah.
sure.
That was out there west of town,
Right.
where the AC field is right now. Then Bob, let's get that one stashed away here, married Jane,
Yes.
who was the organist at the Lutheran Church. And then Bob died, and then Jane married Howard Dressler, who had been married to Harriet Gates, and Harriet Gates died.
Yeah.
And Harriet Gates was also an outstanding musician.
I know that, yeah.
And so Howard has had 2 wives, both of whom are extraordinarily good musicians. And then Howard's son is a professor of music.
I've heard that, I don't know.
Right,
Yeah.
Howard and Harriet's son. Now these things all have webs out there, and that's one of the reasons we like to have these, everyone come in and talk about them, because we're all related one way or another in this town.
That's true.
After Lois died, then who helped in the store?
Frances Crider helped.
Frances Crider.
Crider's mother.
Yeah.
I believe she had worked there years ago.
Oh, many
Before
years
I
ago.
was there.
Yes, Frances, F-R-A-N-C-E-S-K-R-I-E-D-E-R.
That's correct.
Right, Frances Crider.
A great lady.
Oh, she was a wonderful person. She lived west of town
That's right.
in the country.
I want to tell you about that.
Okay.
Many people in Wadsworth perhaps don't know this. I'm sure Dwayne knows it. Homer was her husband. Homer Crider.
Homer Crider's
he
her
worked for
husband,
the
yes.
city.
That's right.
Where they built a Sears Roebuck house. The reason I say this, I saw in a paper about 6 months ago about Sears Roebuck houses. That house on Greenish Road that they lived in is a Sears Roebuck house.
And do you know how much it cost when they built it?
I think $2,200 or something. I wouldn't want to say.
Well, there's another Sears and Roebuck's house on Durling Drive.
When you know about this.
Yes, yes, that's right. And the one on Durling Drive is where Anthony Siffert lived. It is now the second house down from Broad Street. Jack Beach built on the corner, but before that it was the first house, and that was the, I don't know the number, it's one on the east side of the road. And that cost $1,750.
$1,750. I'm not sure. I was thinking
It's a beautiful home.
$2,200, but I wouldn't state that figure accurately.
But they did have a Sears and Roebuck house.
That's right.
And this would have been in the excuse me, in the very early 30s.
Yeah.
Or the late 20s.
Yeah, that's right.
People can't believe that, and quality homes too.
Well, yes.
Very, very good homes.
Yes.
They were not pre-assembled, but they were pre-cut, I believe they were.
See, Homer was a very handy man.
Oh, he was, as a matter of fact, he was somewhat the top man of the city.
Yeah.
Homer,
So
Homer died, many years ago.
he died a long time before Francis did.
Yeah, much longer. I can't remember when, but I'm sure that Dwayne could. I want to get Dwayne on the program.
Yes.
Dwayne has
Well,
a
I should have
tremendous...
interjected about the house. He probably wants to tell you that.
Well, that he can tell us it again, because it certainly is worthy of mention. All of this time, then, you wore, what do you call that thing that you put on the jewelers?
loop.
A loop.
L-O-U-P-E.
A loop. Well, you know, the loop that you wore, not only did you look at watches all the time and look down there at this thing, as a matter of fact, I didn't know that you could wear your glasses without that thing, because you always had this thing on your...
Well, see, if you don't wear glasses, it's one that sticks in your eye.
But you wore glasses. You had them both, didn't you? Mm-hmm. But
one magnifies more than the other, also.
One of the things that I keep on thinking of is that Carl Dudley not only looked at watches with this loop, L-O-U-P-E, but looked at Wadsworth with that loop, because you know everything that was going on in Wadsworth for about 40, 45 years. Is that right?
Well, thank you. Yes.
For some time, a long time. What was Wadsworth like? What were the stores? Who was here in 1954?
Okay. Right beside us was the Wolf's, they called it a department store.
Department store. And tell us who the Wolfs were, Cleo and...
And I can't tell you his dad's name because I have met him, but he was out of it. Cleo was running the store.
Yeah, Cleo was running the store.
Henry Wolf. Henry Wolf.
Henry Wolf was the father.
That's right.
The old man, that's the wrong word to say.
No.
The father was Henry Wolf, the older gentleman.
That's right.
And Cleo himself wasn't that young, but he
and
was.
across around the corner, Smith Dairy.
Excuse me.
Smith Dairy had a little place there.
Who owned Smith Dairy?
Well, of course, the Smith Company owned it.
From Orville.
Yes, but the manager when I came to town was Ira Shoup, a son-in-law.
Ira Shoup, I-R-A-S-H-O-U-P.
He's a son-in-law.
Right, and Ira has passed on now.
No, his wife passed away recently. Ira's here.
Oh, that's right, his wife passed on.
He told me that, I think he's 86.
86 years old.
And
describe Ira as a physical.
Well, he was a small man.
Small man. And what about hair?
Not much hair. Not even then. And he was manager, and Janet Fulton. Worked there. They had, I get back there at noon, they had terrific sandwiches and milkshakes, wow.
And Sundays?
Yes, you're right.
And was, at that time, did we have...
Close Lockers was next to it.
Close Lockers there, but I'm trying to think of two other people who worked there. One was Yoder. What was her first name? Isla Yoder.
I don't remember.
Used to work there, and one of the Shoe girls used to work there.
Yeah, Virginia Shoe.
Virginia Shoe.
Or Ethel. Virginia.
Ethel?
Virginia worked at the bank, didn't she?
Ethel, yeah, Ethel Shoe.
Ethel Shoe. She became a practical nurse.
That's right, exactly. That's right, and she worked there.
And then after Ira left there, Mrs. Brown managed it.
I didn't know Mrs. Brown.
She managed that.
And then you're talking about Close Lockers next. You have to describe the lockers because there are no more lockers left that I know of around here. And people who will be viewing this show, this program 50 years from now will wonder what a locker was. Tell us about them.
Well, for instance, my dad still had the farm, and we would go down and get a quarter or half of beef, and we didn't have a big freezer to take all that, and we would rent a locker down there. We'd bring it back, actually, not cut up, a slab. And Don Close, who you remember?
Don Close was one of the butchers there.
He was the owner, that's when I was here. And he would cut it up, and you went to the locker for $3 a month, I believe, and store it there, and you had a key, and anytime you wanted it down, my wife would get enough for maybe meals for a week, and just take it home and put it in our small refrigerator.
Right. In other words, they went out of business for what reason?
Well, Don sold that to...
no, I mean the freezing industry.
Oh, I think people beginning to get a little more affluent, and they got the bigger freezers than... They
got home freezers.
Exactly.
That's right. And then those things went by the wayside, but at one time they were very popular.
Definitely.
And you had either a big box or a small box with a key.
Depending how much you want to pay.
How much you want to pay.
And wasn't there one seizure I never...
West of town also, yes. Ringer's Locker.
Right. I don't know, I was never there. But.
Yeah, and you would walk in, in this room horribly, horribly cold.
Yes. And also you could buy meat there, of course.
You could buy meat also, but just horribly, horribly cold when you would walk in.
Oh, you didn't fool around, no.
And in the summertime, you would come in from a 95-degree temperature and go into 0 degree, and you would be all bundled up, and you would just freeze to death, and you would get out of there as fast as you possibly could. They didn't have to have the signs, no loitering. Well, there was no loitering there whatsoever, because you got out of there in a hurry. Tell us a little bit about Don Close. What was he like?
Don was a great guy, philosopher I would call him.
Oh yes, a philosopher. That's a good word for him.
And he was telling me that he was interested. Well, he said, I would give up what few years I have left on life if I could come back in 100 years. And I said, Don, if you could come back in 100 years, you couldn't stand it. Things would be so different, you know. What's it going to be like 75? That was 25 years ago. 75 years from now, or 100 years from the time he spoke, what's going to be here? He wouldn't know what to do, and I wouldn't know what to do.
Well, that's true. As a matter of fact, some of us who were not part of that computer revolution have a rough time even setting our watches.
That's right.
You know, daylight savings time and the Eastern Standard Time, when you have to set your watches either ahead or behind. Honest to heavens, it becomes a real chore because every watch has a different way of doing it, and you forget from 6 months at a time.
I knew who I was going to see the Monday morning after those changes.
Who's going to be there?
I knew who it was going to be.
Because they couldn't change their own watches.
That's right.
That's right.
And most of them, I say this respectfully, most of them were elderly people.
My mother-in-law, who is bright as anyone could be, she's a stroke victim, but her mind is keen as a bell, and 87 years old, can do everything in this world intellectually except change her watch. So she has me do that, but I forget, from time to time.
And let me tell you who else was in town.
Okay, please do.
This is blowing your mind, or not your mind, but some young people's mind. A&P and Kroger,
A&P and Kroger
were beside each other.
That's right.
In that little building there, right there.
That's right. Right, and they were beside each other on College Street.
Right there.
College Street there. Kroger's was smaller than the A&P.
That's right.
The A&P was huge. Well, huge for that time of day. Tell us who worked in the A&P. I'll give you a couple clues. Don Opplinger.
Yes.
And what did Don do? And tell us about philosophizing with Don Opplinger.
I can't tell you. I didn't know Don that well.
Well, he was just a tremendously overt person, and loved to talk. And I think that he would have been a butcher for nothing, just so they could deal with people. But the people, and here again with respect, the elderly ladies would just go up because he would make the biggest fuss over them, and help them out. And they would stand in line waiting for Don. They could have 4 clerks in the meat market. Of course, that wasn't when you didn't pick anything up. I mean, it's all done, cut right then and there.
Sure.
4 clerks would be free, and the ladies would be standing in line for Don Opplinger. Who was the manager there?
I don't know then.
Nipper.
But when they moved, we're talking about A&P.
A&P. Nipper.
He was up when they moved the
Yeah, he was down there too.
I don't know if he was downtown.
Yeah, he was.
Okay. Yeah.
And where did Nipper live? Do you remember Mr. Nipper? I can't think of his first name right now.
He had a nickname.
Yeah, but I can't think of his real name.
I can't either. He might have lived on Crestwood Avenue.
Well, I think that he at one time lived on Broad Street, way out, almost beyond the township.
That's right, he did.
Nipper. We'll get a phone call tonight telling us what Nipper's first name is. I cannot think of it right now.
Know.
What was his nickname even?
Well, Nip, did they call him?
Well, we call him Nip, I mean, but he had to have a first name.
Yeah, I know.
His mom didn't call him Nip.
No, I don't think so.
Who were some of the other people who worked in the A&P? Do you remember?
There I don't. Now, Mrs. Miller, I remember, worked after the move.
They moved up, and the move. Tell us where the move is, because they're no longer there. Where did they move to?
Well, where CVS is now on High Street.
We'll have to give a geographical location. We're on High Street, on the northwest corner of High Street and what?
Boyer.
Boyer. Northwest corner of High Street and Boyer. And that was really, really something in terms of, quote, supermarketing at that time.
Indeed it was.
And they moved up there, what year do you think?
Well, I lived on Prospect, and at that time it was about 1957. The reason I remember it because they came around and wanting to buy our property on Prospect, backed into that, and they were going to expand and buy all the property on from High Street to Pardee on the south side of Prospect, but that didn't materialize. So that was about roughly 57, 58.
57. His name wasn't Louis Nipper, was it?
Lou Nipper.
Lou Nipper, yeah.
You got
Louis Nipper. It comes to me after a while. What about going up and down that side of the store or the street where you were? What was on the west side of Stonier's Jewelry, where you worked?
Bob All had a meat market.
Right. Tell us a little bit about Bob All. We had his wife in here. Bob, of course, is gone.
Yes.
Betty Flood All.
Yes.
But tell us a little bit about his father, Merle.
Yeah. Okay. When I came to town, at least, Merle was blind.
Yes. Well, yeah. Very, very hard to see.
Or maybe not legally blind. I believe he was.
Yeah.
And he, I think, more or less, well, I remember kind of sat in the back of the store, and Bob handled the customers in the meat. And then just west of there, Knapp's Farstone had a toy store like. Then across the street, of course, a Mennonite church. And just,
which, of course, is not Mennonite now.
No, okay. And just east of it, now people don't remember this, there's a house set there.
That's right.
On a bank.
And to explain that house to us.
Well, there's a little porch on the front, and Mr. Franks, an elder gentleman, lived in that house. And he's a nice man. He was very hard of hearing. And
what did he do all day?
As far as I know, sat on a porch.
Sat on the porch all day long.
And my store sometimes. And, you remember things. One of the clerks was wrapping a package one day. She run a knife over this rib, and it kind of makes a noise, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Franks was in there. And he started looking around, and he said, "Where's that dog?" I just remember those things, you know. He thought that dog was in there.
Because when you make that kind of, sounds like a yip or something.
Of course, there was an alley there, Bender Court.
Bender Court.
And
Joe Bender.
Mrs. Powers lived in one of those small houses back there. Will Powers' mother.
Will Powers' mother, right. Mm-hmm.
She lived there.
Well, the little house that you're talking about is really a little house.
Yes, it was.
Very little house.
It would be on the east side of that
Bender's Court.
Bender Court.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Bob Sifford was across the street there.
And Bob Sifford did what?
He had a film station. Then he, for a short time, he sold Ramblers there, if you remember.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And then there was Springer's Furniture Store.
Springer's Furniture Store, and describe that building.
Well, it was probably a 3-story brick building.
That was 3-story. Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Springer was there, Al Springer.
Al Springer and his wife.
That's right, and they had a son.
And a daughter.
That's right, and she married Jerry, just big basketball star for Wadsworth. She married Jerry Lang.
Jerry Lang, yes. Mm-hmm.
She married him.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a son. And the first 2 people I met in Wadsworth, I came out to see the store and talk to Mr. Stone. Went in Kleckner's restaurant. That's
yes, Bill Kleckner.
Their law office is now, Larry Locke. And the first 2 people I met was Cleo Wolf and the Springer boy. I can't come up with the Springer boy's name.
His name was Richard too, wasn't it?
I can't tell you.
Richard Springer.
Was it?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of, and then Don Merriman's Goodyear store with the gas pumps out in front.
Right. So we had Sifford down there west of Don Merriman.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Not Sifford.
Yeah,
Sifford, west of Don Merriman. And describe Don Merriman's store.
Don had, of course, the Goodyear store and some tires, but it had a lot of records in there. I would say there's more a record shop perhaps than anything else. And Don was a great guy.
Who worked there at the time?
Well, this is kind of funny. I can't tell you. There was this young man who worked there.
Burbeck?
He moved to Florida.
Burbeck.
Yeah, okay. Mm-hmm. But then, and we won't get into politics. This is political news, though, because Don hired Joe Neath's daughter.
Joe Neath's daughter, that's right, Paula Neath.
Of course, she passed away.
Yes, she did. She passed away with some kind of a younger disease.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
She was only about, what, 20 years old when she died?
20, 21.
What a sad, sad day that was.
And she worked for Don, and that was people. Tell
us why that was so significant.
Well, because Don was Democratic mayor and a good mayor. And they're Democrats, and Joe Neath was just as strong Republican as you ever met in your life.
Right.
And I'm sure, I would say, my own opinion, which everything I'm giving you is my opinion, I think Don probably liked Joe, but I doubt if Joe liked Don at all.
Well, Joe Neath died.
Yeah.
And
commissioner at the time.
He was a county commissioner. And when Joe Neath died, before he died, I was on council, city council, and he said to me, and I'll say this to my dying day because it is so true. Yeah. He said, "Caesar, the only time in my lifetime that I ever voted for a Democrat was for you."
I believe that. The only thing I would doubt is if he voted for you.
Well, so when I went to the funeral then, I went to the funeral and Joe Neath, his son Joe, was there, and I mentioned that to him, and he thought that was so significant that he told everyone, you know, there were people at the funeral home, and not everyone, he just told people at the funeral home. Yeah, Joe Neath was as strong a Republican as Don was a Democrat, but I do think, you know, that Wadsworth, we don't really look at those things. I mean, Paula was a good employee, and that was fine. That worked out very well. The tragedy was that she died, and it was such a pity because there were just two children, Joe and Paula.
And he passed away too, hasn't he?
Joe,
no.
The boy?
No.
No, not that I know of.
His wife did. Somebody. It's
entirely possible. They don't live in
They lived in
Michigan. Right.
And I don't want to go on the record, but one of them.
Well, it's entirely possible because, you know, we're up there in the ages where that can't happen. Of course, you know, death has never had old people die only, you know. Other
In
people
fact,
die.
when I look at obituaries, as you do as you get older, I don't mean scared, I'm not afraid of death, but so many people much younger than you are dying.
Oh yeah, you bet, that's true. That's so very true. So we had Don Merriman there, and what about that hodgepodge of little stores just east of Don Merriman's?
Okay, just east of Don. I think this was a little bit later than you're talking about. The liquor store.
It was there for years.
Well, I don't know if it was at the first or not. Was it?
Oh yeah.
Was it? Okay.
It was there in the 40s.
Oh, okay. It was there at that time then.
It was there in the 40s. Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure when it came.
What was the man's name who was in charge of the liquor store? Tall, bald-headed. I didn't. I knew it was obviously. I know it wasn't permitted in there. I didn't. Wouldn't have anyway. But it was a state store.
Yes, right.
And there was a bald-headed man because you could see him from the window all the time, and he wore a shade.
And then, of course, the Western Union store was just
Western Union. That's one that no one remembers anymore now.
Mr. Williams managed that.
And which Williams was that?
But it was none of the Wadsworth Williams.
No. There were some twin Williamses.
Floyd and Cloyd.
Floyd and Cloyd, but they were not the ones we were talking about. Okay.
No. I can't tell you. His name was Williams. And they moved in, of course, it was closed. And they moved to, they transferred him someplace else where they still had a Western Union.
Right. Now, if you wanted to send a telegram, you would go to the Western Union there.
Sure.
But of course, no one does that anymore. You call or you.
I remember he was a pretty decent softball pitcher, Mr. Williams was, and I played on the softball teams in Wadsworth and used to bat against him. He was a pretty good pitcher.
Oh, is that right? Mm. Oh, well, you have to tell us about your softball prowess there, but how about going around the corner? On
the right, it was on
the right store, that's right, I forgot that.
And then Holden Hardware, I believe.
Now, who was in Wright's store at the time? Sam Diamond and?
No.
Who was? Sam Diamond used to own it.
That's not the name. He lived up on High Street.
Tubasing?
No.
Who lived on High Street?
The manager of the Wright store.
Oh, because Sam Diamond lived on Broad Street on the south side of the road, 4 or 5 houses down from Pardee when he was.
Can't up the gentleman's name. He ran the Wright store. And Fern Leatherman used to work there. Then she worked for me after that.
Fern Leatherman. Tell us all about Fern Leatherman.
Leatherman.
Fern, what was her maiden name?
I can't tell you. She's from Medina.
That's right.
But Warren Leatherman is her husband. Mm-hmm. They lived on North Pardee. Well, they lived on State Street, just as you would turn a corner off from Main on one of those houses. Then they moved. I lived on North Pardee when I first came to Wadsworth. And they lived on North Pardee across to me almost. And Fern now lives down at Lincoln Manor.
Mm-hmm. Fern would be up in her 80s.
She's about 10 years older than me.
So she's about 82 or 83?
81, 82. If she's watching this, 81, Fern.
Oh, yeah, that's right, that's right. You ought to make sure that it's not more than that. See, I'm the only one who always wants to give you more so that I'm sure you have enough. Whom do you remember at Hoagland's Hardware? Was Highland Hoagland still there?
No.
He was gone? What about Ruth, his wife?
Yeah, yes.
She was still there?
Yes.
And describe Ruth to us.
Well, she was a nice lady. I think she was insinuated and probably sort of short to some people, but she was a nice lady.
She's straight up. You knew exactly where you stood.
That's exactly right.
And we did have Everett Perkins talk about Hoagland's Hardware.
Yes.
At a previous program. Everett bought them from the...
Yes, he did.
And Glenn Hoagland. Remember Glenn?
Yes, I do remember.
Does anyone know where Glenn is now?
No.
If he still were living, I'd love to get him on the program.
I don't know.
But he was a tremendous person. I really enjoyed him. And what about the saloon next door? Was that there, Bob's Cafe?
Yes, it was.
And who was running that?
Like you, I don't know.
Probably Bob. Isn't that something? Sondels, Bob Sondels.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, could be at that time in the 50s. He might have been retired, but then I'm not pretty positive. Now, before we get too far on some of these beautiful memories, and incidentally, we're not going to be able to finish today, so we'll have you back. But before we get too far, what I'd like to do is to hear a little bit more about your personal life. You got married to Catherine. Catherine Huffman, H-O-F-F-M-A-N, way back in 1951. And did that produce any?
3 great daughters.
3 great daughters. And tell us about those 3 great daughters and where they are right now, whom they married, and where they where they fit into the Wadsworth scene.
We started with the oldest daughter, Janet.
Born?
1952.
1952.
Graduated from Wadsworth High School. And she went to Ashland College. And she went to Washington, D.C. to work for Charlie Mosier.
Charlie Mosier, who was the Republican, excuse me, the Republican consul, or the congressman
right.
from Lorain, Ohio.
Yeah, I think, yes, Lorain District. He lived in Oberlin, I believe.
Oberlin, probably, yes.
I believe he did.
Yeah, but he was from that area.
Yes, yes.
Right.
Yes.
And he was a newspaper editor.
Yes.
And did she work for him as a congressman or as a newspaper editor?
No, she worked for him as general work. She answered all of his mail. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you do understand these things. He was glad, and she deserved the job, don't get me wrong, but he was glad to have somebody from this district, because his other help was around Washington, you know. And people came in to visit. Oh, I've got a girl from Wadsworth working here, you know.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
That was great for Charlie.
And that is no secret that what we typically do in those cases where a congressman gets a position in Washington, he then hires people of his own party.
Sure.
We need to find out a little bit more about that. You're not a politician, but you are heavily involved with the Republican Party, and a highly respected person, both by Democrats and Republicans. And I can say that because I'm your counterpart, and I certainly, in all of my relationships with people in the political scene, I have never heard anyone say anything bad about you. So that speaks very well for you. But he selected her for her party politics as well. Then.
Well, what happened? To be honest with you, to be truthful with you, I guess is the right word. Between her junior and senior year, she went down to work as an
intern.
You
were afraid to say that word. I know what you were thinking. I know what you were thinking.
And Janet was the type of girl that, you know, she didn't have to do anything actually when she went down there. But she was the type of girl, she's used to working, and she worked in office and worked for them, which she didn't have to do. And when I went down to pick her up, they said, well, she had gone to school one summer, so she was going to graduate in January. And the first I knew about it, they said, well, we're seeing you again in January. Said, you're coming back into work, because she had worked for nothing, you know. And so she had 2 teaching certificates, but she went back there to work.
And she deserved that responsibility.
Yes, she handled the job. It wasn't just a political thing.
No, I understand that.
And she answered all the mail. And I guess Charlie's dead now, so it doesn't matter, but she answered all his mail, and there was only one person, but sent him so much mail, at least every week, and complained about everything. And he finally told Janet, don't answer this man's mail anymore. It's almost embarrassing. He's from Clearview Acres.
Oh, really? Oh, my. Oh, my. Wow. Well, you know, that's your neighborhood, isn't it?
No.
No, you don't live in Clearview Acres.
I live off from Trees Road, Kaiser Drive.
Oh, Kaiser Drive. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
What about daughter number 2?
Number 2 is Mary, and another great girl. She is married. She went to Miami of Ohio and Akron U. And I want to interject this before I forget. I know, Caesar, some things. I know how many people you have helped at Akron U, especially from Wadsworth area, but I'm sure other places. But I want to commend you. I know several people, and if I know several, there are probably hundreds that you did help when you were dean at Akron U. I want to tell you that. Well,
that's kind to hear, but you know, I did help. That was my job, to help people.
Okay.
And I wanted to do that.
But anyway, Mary went to Akron U, and she graduated. She worked at Kent State for a while at heading up the night program, and you know more about that than I do. But she's married and lives in Stowe now with a boy 15 years old, a grandson. I have 3 granddaughters and 2 grandsons. And my story is, I had 3 older sisters, and I had a wife and 3 daughters. I've had a really tough life.
No males.
But if you would talk to them, I think the story may be different.
Ah, I see. They think that it's okay.
That's the second. My third daughter is Nancy, and she lives in Wadsworth on Dogwood Lane.
Whom did she marry?
She married Bill Joy from Norton.
From Norton.
And I have a grandson by them, and he's in the 7th grade. He played on the 7th grade football team. He's on the 7th grade basketball team. He's quite an athlete.
Well, like Grandpa. You had quite an athletic career as well, did you not?
Not really, most of baseball. But I don't want to get ahead. You asked a question you want to know, but before we ever get finished, I want to tell you about the towers. But maybe you want that another time.
No, that's fine. Go right ahead.
Well, as you remember, Clark's Weber had
yes, right.
bought that area and did a lot of houses and going to be big things. At the start of it, that was before Great Oaks. And if you recall, or maybe you don't know, I knew the background, Hawkins grocery store was going to anchor that, you know.
Yes, right. Hawkins was the Worcester chain.
That's right. And of course, as we won't get into, problems arose there, and you know about this. And so that sat vacant, and it was really becoming an eyesore. And we were talking about housing for the elderly and the handicapped in Wadsworth. Well, I've been on the MMMH board for 23 years, and I've been appointed by both Democrats and Republicans on that board, so, okay. Anyway, so we were hunting for...
Let's determine what MMH are.
Medina Metropolitan Housing Authority.
That's
okay.
right.
So we were hunting for a place in Wadsworth, and there's 5 members on that board. Well, I was on one from Wadsworth, and actually the location was more or less left up to me because I was from Wadsworth. And I could see that as a disgraceful looking place down there, at the corner, telling the truth and all. And so that kind of left up to me, and I chose that place to put the building, good or bad. It was good at that time because there was a grocery store there, Abrams, you know.
Abrams, right.
Right now, maybe it's no grocery store. But anyway, we built that. There are 100 units there. 96 one-bedroom and 4 two-bedroom, and it's filled all the time. In fact, we have maybe an 8% turnover. That's less than 1 a month because people do have to go to the restroom or pass
die.
away, you know.
Or die, sure.
But we're very happy with the operation.
Now tell us where the towers are geographically.
Oh, the towers are the corner of Main. Is that Garfield? I believe it is.
Garfield.
Yeah, that's where they are.
Garfield and Maine. And now what is behind there? The Lincoln Towers, and what is behind the towers?
West of there, you mean?
Yes.
Well, there's nothing right there west of them besides some vacant land there.
Well, I mean, from Pardee.
No, well, from South Pardee, okay.
Yes, right.
Well, of course, if you go straight down South Pardee, you come into the old hospital, which I had 2 daughters born there. And of course, that's nothing the same as old hospital now. It's all been redone.
Right.
But then that's there. And then if you go east of there, there's a house or 2 in there. There isn't much in there.
Nothing left. I mean, you took the whole block, didn't you?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying here is that there's nothing left there. You took the whole block.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about essentially, you from Maine, bordered on the south by Garfield and on the west by Pardee,
Yes.
and going almost all the way up to Mill.
Yeah.
Almost all the way up to Mill, with the exception of what, 2 or 3 houses,
Yeah.
if that.
Now there's a corner lot there that there used to be a house and it's been torn down. I can't tell you lived there years ago. That would be in a corner of Pardee and Garfield. There was a house there at one time. It's a vacant lot. I've seen signs there. In fact, in city council, somebody had a permit, or they wanted to get a permit to build an apartment house on that lot.
Yeah, well, it burned
That's
down.
privately owned.
Didn't it burn down?
Well, I'm not saying. Maybe it did.
I think it did burn down, and there was,
You know
I
who
think
did.
that there was some...
Brother and sister lived there.
Yes, that's right. It burned down, and I think that there were some, oh boy, I'm drawing some, I'm going to have to go way back in my memory on this one. I think it burned down, and as a result of some tomfoolery.
Arson, perhaps.
Well,
perhaps.
I don't think it was arson so much as it was, maybe some people had a little bit more to drink than they needed to.
Or cigarettes, maybe.
Something like that, that's right. There are some aspects of your life we're not going to be able to get into today, but we're going to have you come back. But just so that we can identify what those are, we'd like to hear about your political prowess. That is, not necessarily as a politician, but what you did in the party. 2, I'd like to hear more about your baseball, because I think that's extremely important. People think that people who look through loops all day long don't do anything else. And 3, the one that you're so humble about, and we know how influential you have been in molding the fabric of charity within Wadsworth. If you don't mind talking about that.
Well, I'm going to say this sounds corny, Sterling, because he's my buddy. See, it sounds corny.
Now Sterling's going to kill you for calling this Democrat.
I have
Sterling.
a corny saying, that I don't think, as long as my health is good, and I think for 72 it's fairly good, I don't think God put me on earth to do nothing. If I can help an organization or an individual directly or indirectly, and I have done it, you know that, I think that's my obligation, responsibility. And now I am on the Salvation Army Board. I'm secretary there. I volunteered at the Wadsworth Hospital. I was on the ad hoc committee for the new Oaks at Medina, and I do work at my church. And
what church is that?
First Christian Church.
First Christian. Mm-hmm.
And I've been on the FEMA board.
FEMA is the Federal Emergency Management Association.
That's true, and it is.
Or agency, I guess it is.
They don't need to be mentioned, but I've done.
They do need to be mentioned, and we're gonna make you mention them. I know that you don't like to because you're extremely humble, but you have done a tremendous amount for the city of Wadsworth. We want to do that. We're going to bring you on the second time because we aren't anywhere close to it. But just before we leave today, I would like to go back into the personal. And your dear and lovely wife, Catherine, passed on a few years ago.
86, believe it or not.
86. It's been, what, 12 years already? 12 years.
On our wedding anniversary.
On your wedding anniversary. Oh, boy. That has to be a tough one. Would you mind just sharing the last, well, she was quite ill.
Yeah. Had cancerous brain tumor.
Yep, and unfortunately that does take it.
Yeah, after somebody in the family has it, you become more aware of it. And I don't know anybody yet that survived a cancerous brain tumor for long. Now, benign, that's a different story. But I don't know anybody that survived from it.
Yeah. Oh, it's a pity. She was a wonderful and lovely person, and maybe when we talk again the next time, we can bring some of those good things that she did. Here in the community as well as in the home, but she was not the type of person, as I remember her, to really exploit herself, never to put herself out in front, and always kind of reserved. Did what was so necessary to assist the kids and all of that. Before we leave today, I'd like to ask one more question that maybe you can respond to, and not necessarily in brief, but it's a shorter question. You decided to stay in Wadsworth because you love Wadsworth. And the reason that you love Wadsworth is that you just found a home here and all of that kind of a thing. What is the one major reason that you actually fell in love with Wadsworth in addition to the people who were here?
Well, the people here are 99% of it, I would say. And it was a great place to raise my family. And great school system, the teachers are great, and everything. I don't think, Caesar, that I could have picked any place in the United States that I would have, quote unquote, fit in as well or been as happy as I have been here. I mean that sincerely. Well,
I can understand that, and we certainly do appreciate, those kinds of accolades coming for Wadsworth. Those of us who were born here, I was born here, know nothing else. And even though we know nothing else, we still have a tremendous love for this community.
You should have.
But it's even better if we have someone like you who has something with which to compare it. and still says the same thing. Now, I love it because it is mine. You love it because it has become yours.
Accepted, I would say.
Oh, accepted. My heavens, if you would move, the city would move with you, wherever you would go. We're going to say goodbye at this point, and thank you for coming today, but we will see you again.
Thank you.
And we want to see you again very, very soon. So thanks again for coming today. And when we see you the next time, we'll go more into detail on all these things. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Caesar.